So thanks for coming, everybody. Welcome to week.
I lost track.
It's all blending at this point. Those that haven't met Jake yet. This is Jake. You come to us from Florida State.
Yep. The north edge of the Ian Cone, as we talked about last week.
So. Yes. That's fun. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So I've met most of y'all in here, but I just started as a postdoc about 2.5 months ago or so. So I'm still fairly new to the area and looking forward to getting to know as many people around here as I can. It's really great, everything that y'all have set up around here, including these weather briefings. Really good way to get people together and just nerd out for a little while. So I'm a tropical guy first and foremost, so I apologize in advance, but I'm going to start with tropics and then I'll kind of wiggle back towards state college weather. Taking a look at the satellite over the Atlantic right now, we have a couple of areas of disturbed weather right here, which kind of looks like one, but really on the southwest side here in the East Pacific is now Tropical Depression Julia, which performed a successful Atlantic to East Pacific crossover. And I believe this is actually the first time on record that we've had 2 storms in the same year actually pull that off, because Bonnie did it back in July. Before that, we would have had to go back to 2016 to have any of that happen in the first place. It made landfall in Nicaragua, crossed over into the East Pacific just barely, and then made a re-landfall in El Salvador and is bringing a lot of disturbed weather to parts of Central America right now. But also a big thing about today is it's actually the 4-year anniversary of Hurricane Michael's landfall, which was pretty close to my former home in Tallahassee, Florida, as you can see right here on the map. This is a radar loop from Brian McNulty. If you don't follow him, he's one of the GOATs when it comes to compiling these radar archives of hurricanes going all the way back to the 1990s. So this is from the Eglin Air Force Base radar, if I'm not mistaken, showing Michael's intensification all the way up until landfall, where it was the 4th Category 5 landfall in the United States on record. And it was the first since Andrew in 1992, as Brian eloquently states here. And this is one thing to kind of keep in mind is, obviously, since it's the anniversary, we're still in a time of year where these kinds of intense storms are still a possibility. We saw, Wilma in 2005. That was a really strong October storm. So even though it's starting to kind of wind down a little bit and the Atlantic is pretty quiet for now, always got to kind of keep our, stay on our toes a little bit, because these kinds of storms can still stick around even into early November. This was a video that I took. Some friends and I last summer went to go check out Tropical Storm Fred down in Mexico Beach, which was right near where Michael made landfall and where some of its most extreme impacts were. And this is a video that I took of some of the damage that was left over from that storm 3 years later. So these kinds of scars are still very apparent in areas like this. Marissa.
Oh, I was going to say, what was it like to live through that? I know you weren't right where landfall was, but you were very close.
Yeah, so we got really lucky in Tallahassee, where we kind of stayed just outside the eye wall, and the Florida State campus never lost power. So we were able to kind of camp out there. We did TV coverage from our studio in there, which we had done for a couple of other storms in the past as well. So that made it a little better, and I was able to kind of escape for the weekend and go to South Florida and hang out with family. But when Hermine hit in 2016, which was kind of the storm that really motivated me to get into tropical meteorology for a career, even though it was, just a Category 1, it kind of opened my eyes as to how impactful those kinds of storms can be. The difference between Michael in Tallahassee and Hermine in Tallahassee was the kind of seasonality at which it happened, because Hermine was, I think, September 2nd. And you're not going to get any reinforcing cold fronts to help you get through those power outages. It was a very uncomfortable week for us there. The one silver lining for us with Michael is that we had a really strong front come through like 2 days later. So we had a morning of like 53-degree weather, and it was actually, pretty bearable to get through that. Obviously, it was a lot worse. The farther west you go, you can kind of still see the damage scars even along Interstate 10 well inland, because this thing was a Cat 3 going all the way into Georgia. So yeah, it was pretty surreal to see that. I had never been to that area, and to have that be so obvious still 3 years later was really, really profound. So I wanted to just show the Julia crossover really quick. This was its wind field history. If you actually do the cone archive, it just uses the East Pac ones, because I think it kind of broke the NHC system a little bit. So I can't really find the Atlantic versions of the cones right now, but it kind of struggled with land interaction near Venezuela and the ABC Islands over here before it was actually able to get a well-defined center. And then yet another case of intensification up through landfall. You don't see any hurricane force winds until maybe 6 to 12 hours before it actually hit the Nicaraguan coast. And this was actually somewhat close to where Eta and Iota made landfall in 2020. So this part of Nicaragua is an area that has seen its fair share of hurricanes over the last 3 years or so. So Julia will dissipate over land. Again, plenty of rainy weather for areas like El Salvador, Belize, Guatemala. In the Atlantic here, we're looking at one area of disturbed weather, which I'll kind of show on the satellite here. You see this upper level outflow extending pretty well to the north from Julia. That is kind of helping to give some vertical wind shear to this system, along with its proximity to land, kind of making things a little bit complicated in terms of any development. So the National Hurricane Center isn't really expecting this to really get going much, and eventually kind of get steered westward into the Bay of Campeche and later Mexico. We have pretty strong high pressure in place over the southeast, which should help to not have this lift to the north, thankfully for us. So let's zoom into Pennsylvania a little bit. And, yeah, so obviously you look outside, it's a pretty pleasant day. We had a really beautiful sunrise over State College this morning, and a little bit of cloud cover, still trying to migrate over here from Lake Erie with a couple of light sprinkles over in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area. Not really anything to ruin your day or anything, and we're not expecting any rainfall down here or even anywhere along Interstate 80 per se. But obviously, across most of the country, it's a pretty pleasant day. We aren't really seeing too much cloud cover. We'll actually see a little bit more clearing tonight. We're going to have a little bit of a short wave trough coming through. That's going to, once that passes, we should get some pretty good clearing. A nice, beautiful night for us tonight. So this is kind of the surface analysis as of 8 a.m. this morning. High pressure kind of camped out over West Virginia and the Tennessee Valley, with a very weak front stationed a little bit to the north of us. And again, this little shortwave trough that you can see on this GFS analysis here. Let me start it off at the 12Z this morning. It's basically passing through our area right now at 500 millibars. And once that passes through, we should enter kind of a pretty boring zonal upper level pattern that isn't really going to be doing too much to us over the next couple of days. But I'll go into what we're expecting Thursday a little bit more here. So that's my next thing here. Yeah, so let me go ahead and just kind of dive into that. So this is the Storm Prediction Center outlook. I'm actually going to go to the day 3. There's a marginal risk in place across much of the Ohio Valley, dipping down into the Ozarks. So a pretty broad area here, and this is a very synoptic kind of setup where we're going to have a really deep trough kind of digging into the eastern half of the country. And worth watching for areas close to Pennsylvania on Thursday for the potential for a little bit of an isolated wind event. And that's kind of the big idea for Wednesday here across this area. The thermodynamics around here aren't going to be looking too impressive for any kind of widespread severe weather, but kinematically it could be could have some isolated gusty weather if you get one of those particularly strong showers to kind of roll on through. So go ahead and go back to the day 4. They say predictability too low here on the SPC website, which is pretty common. And I think a big reason for that is that this potential wind risk is over a very wide and kind of diffuse area. Shouldn't really see any big concentration of damaging gusts or anything like that. But the potential is there for a little bit of isolated severe weather all the way from our neck of the woods down into the Tennessee Valley, for example. So you can kind of read that in Chris Broyle's discussion for Thursday, day 4. Over the eastern half of the nation, a large-scale system will move slowly eastward as multiple shortwaves move through the base of a large upper-level trough. So again, kind of a big synoptic scale system that's going to be having a big influence on our weather, really starting, I'd say, Wednesday night. It's the late part of the week here. So I'll kind of show the evolution of the upper level pattern. This is Tropical Tidbits GFS run, which I believe is just coming in now. I have the 12Z pulled up. So the Euro that I'm going to show next is actually the slightly older one. So a little bit of an offset there, but showing the same kind of idea here, where again, the shortwave kind of moves through, and this is the 250 millibar wind. So looking well aloft here. And we're going to enter kind of again, a pretty boring zonal pattern. Nothing really too profound in terms of upper level flow over the next 24 to 48 hours or so. But then you're kind of starting to see this bigger trough entering the frame here over the northern plains around 36 hours. This will be tomorrow night. And this high pressure is starting to slide away from the eastern seaboard here as we go into the day on Wednesday. And then we'll progressively watch this kind of migrate over to the east and start to have more of an influence on our weather. So again, a lot of upper level forcing here for some shower activity, and as well as you're going to see, I'm going to show a precipitable water animation that's going to show this big fetch of moisture coming all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. So it's looking like a pretty, pretty southern origin in terms of where we're going to be getting our moisture from. And with that could also be a pretty decent rainfall threat for some parts of the Northeast over the next couple of days or so. So I'll go ahead and just show the Euro version for completeness here once this Zoom window decides to go away. There we go. And kind of the same idea here, pretty decent agreement in terms of the timing and the strength of the trough as it kind of moves through, where again, we should be looking at that passing through on Thursday. So weather should start to deteriorate as we get a little bit of that upper level forcing Wednesday nights. Should be increasing cloud cover through the day on Wednesday. After what is going to be like the literal best day in the history of days tomorrow. Looking forward to it so much. Yeah, so this will kind of pass through. This Euro only goes to 90 hours. So let me go back to the GFS and just kind of show its progression. So as we kind of go into the day 4 to 5 range, that kind of moves on through. We're going to get a shot of cold air coming in just in time for the weekend again. So kind of entering this pretty regular pattern of Tuesday and Wednesday is nice and warm. And then sure enough, Friday through Sunday is a whole different story. So, yeah. So I'm going to show, this is again the 12Z GFS, so the one that's just kind of coming in now. It only goes out to 5 days, but that's really all I need to show this feature here. So here's the 850 millibar winds shown as the barbs, and the green and brown colors here are just the anomaly of precipitable water. So green is going to be showing that anomalously moist air, likely from tropical sources. As I kind of set this into motion, again, high pressure kind of camped out over Virginia and West Virginia going into tomorrow. That starts to slide off to the east. And we're going to see this deep fetch of tropical moisture all the way from the Gulf coming up into the central part of the United States. And that starts to slide eastward into Pennsylvania by Wednesday night. So this is the point where we're going to start to see a little bit of an enhanced rainfall threat. Could see a little bit of an isolated flooding concern in parts of the Northeast. I'll show the excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center pretty soon on that, but that should move through fairly quickly. By the time we wake up on Friday morning, we should have drier air in place and looking like it's going to be a much better end to the work week for us. So, could be a pretty nasty day on Thursday, but it's only one day and shouldn't be anything that derails us too much. So here's the excessive rainfall outlook. I decided to go with the interactive view just to kind of be able to zoom in a little bit here. So this is, again, for Thursday is what this is really concentrated on. So a lot of Western New England going into upstate New York. So people fall color chasing in the Adirondacks, not going to have a great day on Thursday. I was just there a couple of weeks ago and saw some of the pictures yesterday. And oh boy, do I regret not going then. But it should just be a one-day thing. Again, this front should be sliding off the East Coast by Friday. So we're looking like we're going to be in pretty good shape here. So with that, I'll go ahead and show the kind of longer range prospects from the Climate Prediction Center. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. And we are almost right in the bullseye of expected below average temperatures in the long range. So this is kind of starting from, what would that be, Saturday on through the early part of next week once this first front rolls through. And there's a reason why this bullseye is as strong as it is, because there might be a pretty big secondary front coming through in the early part of next week as well. So we're expecting near normal precipitation in our area as this front kind of moves through. And again, the Thursday rainfall should not really be reflecting on this 6 to 10 day outlook for precip here. So this is looking more towards another potential for rain that we could be seeing in the early part of next week. It's been an interesting couple of weeks out in the desert Southwest too. I got a friend that's working at the Albuquerque Weather Service office, and it's been kind of a weird cold extension of monsoon season out there. They've had pretty anomalous rainfall for them for October, and again, pretty dry air working in all the way from the Northwest down into the southeastern United States, where we've been seeing that high pressure really in place over the last couple of days. So I know I'm going kind of quick here, but I want to just kind of wrap up with this little teaser from the National Blend of Models, and this is effective for Monday afternoon. Because again, we should be seeing a secondary cold front working through in maybe the day 7 to 8 time frame. The exact timing and strength of that front is obviously preliminary and non-operational, but potential for some highs that maybe don't even crack 50 degrees in the early part of next week, which given I'm not very familiar with the area still in terms of average, climatological averages, though I have heard that the start of this month has been the coldest October since 2003 so far. So having something like this kicking in the middle of the month would really amplify that and bring us into some cold that we haven't seen in a while around central Pennsylvania. So yeah, at this point, I guess I'll open it up. Let's discuss interactively, and thanks for listening.
Would be, how is that prolonged monsoon season impacting that area's drought concerns?
Yeah, well, actually, let me pull up the drought monitor from last week. I haven't looked at this in a while, so this is a good thing to always pull up.
It's usually a good thing when it's not being talked about on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I haven't looked at this in months, so I don't really know what it looked like in June, for example, but this looks encouraging to me based on every time I've ever done TV stuff ever over the last 4 years. It seems like they're perpetually in an exceptional drought, so that's encouraging. Obviously, with you kind of have the trade-off of the occasional flooding risk if you get, some particular mesoscale setup that favors that, but yeah, this is pretty good, especially because this isn't really the time of the year where they should be seeing that rainfall. So the longer we can kind of keep that going, the better for those areas. But obviously we need more rain in the kind of four corners going into California once again, as always, it seems. So and what do we look like here? Okay, yeah, pretty good. Well, actually a little bit of drought in southern New England and down towards New York City. So yeah, I don't look at this nearly as much as I should. So way to get on me.
They made this 2 days. Oh,
This is
Tuesday.
Yeah, they always make the graphics on Thursdays and the data goes through the preceding Tuesday. So this is as of 6 days ago. So yeah.
It was still raining on the Jersey Shore, at least in parts of New England on Tuesday.
Oh yeah, those Indian leftovers were so pesky. Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll get better.
Yeah.
The very first satellite of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Are we just coming out of Africa there?
Yeah, so I'm in there's an email list about like tropical discussion that I've been in for a while now, and people always kind of throw in these little animations of because it's not unprecedented to have these Saharan dust events in October. It is pretty rare they get all the way into the Caribbean, and especially towards like Florida and the Gulf. It's not getting that far in this case, but this is a stronger than average event. At this point, the main development region season is basically shut down. The climatology of this area once we get into mid-October isn't really favorable for these waves to develop out here. And you already see kind of an anemic ITCZ in the Eastern Atlantic at this point. So the dust probably, helping that to an extent. So now is the time of year where we just kind of watch these weak waves migrate over to the Caribbean and then kind of enter a more favorable environment here. So yeah, it's generally the Caribbean. You sometimes get a little bit of subtropical activity, in October, November. But if you're looking out for a strong storm, it's this area. It's the Western Caribbean. That's where Michael came from a few years ago, Eta and Iota in 2020. So, it's not impossible, but our traditional kind of, long track wave season is pretty much done. Yeah. Now that I said that, I'm sure we'll have a storm in like 3 days. So, Oh, geez.
I remember it was in the.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
If I recall, actually, let me just pull up the synoptic history on just Wikipedia for the crude version. Let's just do it that way. Okay, so it's kind of a Western Caribbean genesis. Yeah, kind of an awkward initial track, but yeah, I mean, in reality, like the origin stories for a lot, unless it's one of these like Central America gyre kind of things, which does come back this time of year, and that was the Michael genesis pathway, you still get the waves. That's kind of where these come from. It's just they don't develop out here anymore, and it takes a long time for them to kind of get into a more favorable environment. So yeah. I love looking at these kind of weird historical tracks. There's some really strange ones if you go like back into the pre-satellite era, where I saw one from the like, I don't know, 1930 or something that like started in the Bay of Campeche and then did a full cycle around the Gulf Coast and hit Northeast Florida.
I totally forgot that it even parts of Cuba.
Yeah.
Sandy, which I go value, I can see it was strong storm there.
Yeah, it was a category 3, if I'm not mistaken, at peak.
Yeah, so New York centric, I forget.
Yeah.